What if the emotions you've been avoiding are actually the ones that'll set you free? Today I'm going to share how embracing vulnerability and shadow work can lead you to true transformation and deep healing. Let me just start by saying that healing isn't all light work, and it's definitely not linear. Healing is absolutely affirmations, self-love, self-care practices, right? It's definitely those gratitude lists, but some of the deepest, most profound healing happens in those raw and painful places, when those triggers come up again and we're brought back to things that we really have to heal. Sometimes these things come up and we thought that we were done with them. Sometimes these lessons come up that we thought that we were over with, but life likes to show up with a little pop quiz for us to ask us if we're really healed, if there's more that we need to process, if there's ways that we need to go deeper to heal further. When all of this comes up, it could feel like we're circling back to the same things, right? It could feel like we never really moved past it and that we never really healed. It can feel kind of like we're spiraling, right? And in a sense, we are spiraling, but not the way that we tend to think. We tend to feel like we're just back at the same thing in the same cycle. But every time that these things come up and we're brought back to old triggers, right, to old wounds that are reopened, we have the opportunity to heal further and to revisit them with more strength and more clarity than we ever had before. So really, when we're returning to it and we feel like we're spiraling, it's really an upward spiral if we're looking at it as an opportunity, one that'll take us higher and make us even stronger. When we're taken back to these triggers, we're given an opportunity to face them and heal something that was still unresolved so we can really move on. Where we might have some feelings that are taking us back to the past. These triggers can make us feel like we're right back to where we were, but we're not, because all of the time, all of the work that we've done, all of the life in between, that past pain, that past wound where it was initially cut and where we are now, that fortifies the difference, that fortifies the distance from the last time that we were in this triggered position. And so when we come back to it, we're being presented with an opportunity to face it with even more strength. And by strength, I don't mean by just thugging it out and being like, oh, I'm not gonna let it get to me. I'm not gonna, feel it. I'm not gonna let myself. No. Strength is true strength is found in deep vulnerability. True strength is being able to bear your emotions, to be able to hold space for them, but to not drown in them. It's being able to ride those waves and not let them pull you down, which is not an easy thing. But when we're able to ride those waves of our emotions, that's when we can truly heal. Because emotions are not working against us, and emotions do not define us. Often people feel like they have to fight their emotions, and that's something that they have to push away. But when we push our emotions away, then we're rejecting a part of ourself. And that part of ourself, that hurt part of ourself, that pain, that wounded inner child, our shadows, they don't disappear. They just become bottled up and suppressed until they explode unpredictably, and you're like, oh shit, where did all that come from? The shadow self, according to Carl Jung's philosophy, is all those aspects of ourself that we reject and that we push away and that we deem as bad or inappropriate, and we push them into a corner, and then we're left with this emotional congestion. To really heal ourselves, yes, we gotta do light and love work, but we gotta embrace our shadows. We have to embrace our pain. We have to be willing to hold space for all aspects of ourselves, for our emotions, and know that our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, they don't define us, right? A lot of times we try to, fight our emotions with our logical mind, saying, oh, I don't have to feel like that because this and this and this, or oh, da 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 da. And it's like we're fighting our emotions instead of embracing them, right? That logical voice of saying, oh, we have to be strong, and oh, we shouldn't feel that, and this is, but Our emotions are often coming to us from our wounded inner child, right? That inner child's pain that we're suppressing. And often our inner child is the one who's coming up crying to be heard. Hold space for your emotions as if you're holding space for a child. It's often our inner child who's coming up when we feel these triggers, when we feel these shadow aspects coming up, who's screaming and crying to be heard. And, often we try to use our rational minds to counter in our emotions and to tell ourselves how we should be feeling, how we should be thinking, or we try to suppress this part of ourselves, But, would you do that if a young child is coming up to you, was crying and saying that they were hurt, even if you thought that they, whatever, they were crying about something stupid, you would hold space for them. I hope, I hope that you would hold space for them and wipe their tears. In the same way, you gotta be doing that for yourself. Listen to your inner child and all that they're feeling without judgment. Ask yourself, open up, and once you surrender to those emotions and open yourself up to what you're feeling, not trying to push it away, you can ask yourself, what am I feeling? And you'll realize a deeper root, instead of immediately you're I'm angry. No, deeper, what am I feeling? Oh, I feel unsafe. Oh, I feel misjudged. Oh, I feel hurt. And then that's a vulnerable thing. That's raw to admit to that vulnerability to yourself, right? Because so often we want to push them away, or we want to disguise these hidden, deeper, painful emotions as something like anger, right? Because that's a fighting emotion. Anger is really a shield. But we want to do that instead of admitting, oh shit, I'm hurt. Oh shit, I'm embarrassed. Oh shit, I feel neglected, right? But true healing requires that raw vulnerability. And that vulnerability can sting like a bitch, okay? You're oh shit, that's really how I'm feeling. And then it's a whole nother wave of emotions. Shadow work requires a great deal of vulnerability, but it's truly so rewarding. I've really embraced the emotional vulnerability of being open to my emotions. It's taken a lot of work and I'm still working on it. But recently, throughout this whole winter, a lot of things have been coming up. It's been a lot of heavy themes, retrogrades, but a lot of, old triggers have been coming up. And I'm revisiting these things I've been talking about. Kind of, hanging out with my inner child, with my shadow self. But this time, I talked about returning these things, but each time leveling up. This time, I found myself, being okay with opening myself to a new level of vulnerability, where I'm not fighting it, I'm not pushing it away, I'm not trying to disguise it as an anger or something it's not. I'm oh shit, I feel hurt. Oh shit, this takes me back to when I, and I felt da-da-da. And it's been intense, a lot of tears, But those tears are really so deeply healing and nourishing for us, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But I really opened myself up to crying, and I really allow myself to indulge in it. I've talked about it in another video, but I've really opened myself up to my emotions and allow myself, when I feel it coming, I feel that sadness, I'm all right, what do I need? What do you need, Chani? You need, kind of I'm taking care of my inner child, when she's coming up with all these emotions. I'm not trying to push her away and judge her. I'm okay, I hear you, baby. What do you need? You need a blanket, you need tissues, you need to put on some sad music and let that shit out. All right, let's do it. And, it's a lot, it's intense, but truly, it's beautiful, because when I open myself up to my feelings like that, and I allow myself that space for them to flow through, then I'm able to truly recognize what they are, and I'm able to see them for what they are and identify where they're coming from. And in that process, I'm able to truly heal them like never before. Healing is not about control and pushing them away. It's about surrendering and letting them kind of just flow through our body. It's about learning, like I said, to ride with the waves. And I'm using all these water analogies because emotions are really heavily symbolized by water. I love to say, all the time, you gotta let it flow to let it go. And that's so true. You just gotta let that shit flow through you. But emotions are really symbolized by water. And You know, like what form of emotional release and emotional healing is more powerful than literally letting that symbolic water flow through your eyes and, you know, just kind of pour through. There's this song that I love by the Cockatoo Twins, and it's called Know Who You Are at Every Age. And there's this one line that's like, I won't heal unless I cry. And she says, like, I won't heal unless I cry, and I won't grow until I let it go. And oh my god, those bars just really, like, it hit something in my heart in a beautiful way, because that is so true. And I love when music, you know, it just gets it like that. Like, it gets that feeling. So speaking of music talking about crying in particular, sometimes sad music can really help us dive deeper into our emotions so that we can kind of work through them and release them. I've spoken about before how music, it really is very powerful, and it can definitely impact our subconscious and change our vibrational frequency. And so that's why we don't want to be listening to sad music all the time. We don't want to be overdoing it, because, you know, it'll kind of take us down to that lower frequency, and we don't want to stay there, right? We don't want that to be, like, you know, affect the way that we think on the regular. But sad music in small doses, when we use it with intention, it can really be a powerful tool of deep healing. It can really help us kind of validate what we're feeling so we can just process it and release it. Sometimes you gotta dive deeper into the emotions to really swim through them. Pain, old wounds, and memories love to come up during shadow work, but it's important that we don't run from them and push them away, and that we really embrace them. Like I said, that state of pain, when we look at those old wounds, right, it can be brutal, but in that state of vulnerability, when we're opening ourselves to that and we're kind of looking back at that from this perspective, this elevated perspective that we're at now, at this distance, we can really gain so much deep understanding. Because when we're in that state of light and love, and we're doing our, you know, our little self-care and our gratitude list and all that beautiful work, you know, like, there's so much healing that we do there, but there's, like I said, there's a certain depth that we have access to when we are in that state of pain, when we are in that state of intense emotion and crying, because only then do we have the power to really feel the full extent of what's coming up. And those triggers and those tears are kind of the key to unlocking what's been deeply embedded and buried in our subconscious. Because when those emotions start flowing through, it's an opportunity for us to look in there and to let it flow through, but also to gain that deeper understanding. In that moment, we can ask ourselves, why is this coming up? What is this? What am I feeling? And allow ourselves to be honest with ourselves. Because through that honesty, we can gain deep understanding. And it's that understanding of ourselves and that understanding of our pain and of our triggers that'll really help us heal on a level like never before. The more you understand the root of your pain, the easier it is to heal. To gain deeper understanding, I think it's incredibly important that we journal or record in some way what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, and what's coming up. This will really help us reflect on what's going on. It'll help us notice the patterns, and it'll help us have much more clarity on what's playing out and the purpose of it coming up. When you're journaling, you can kind of just talk to yourself on paper or talk to yourself in like a recording app. I do that sometimes. But it's kind of just like you can just talk to yourself and write it out, like, what's going on? What's happening? Why do I feel bothered? What am I learning from this? And just, you kind of get to look at that and kind of have a conversation with your soul or your inner child, right? When you just are able to write that out without judgment, and just, you kind of get to see it clearly on like another level. And you don't have to be journaling in the moment. Sometimes That's super helpful for me. Like sometimes while I'm crying, I'll write it out, or sometimes when I feel like I have to cry, but you know, it's not coming yet, I just start writing it out and it just helps it all flow out, you feel me? But sometimes it's all, you know, very raw and I kind of just got to sit with it, process it, and then after the fact, then I revisit it and, you know, write it out, what happened, this and that, what's coming up and what I learned. All this shadow work and all this healing and understanding, it'll help us let go of that pain. It'll help us let go of the past and close those wounds for good. And it could be weird to let go of the past, you know? It could feel like, you know, you're kind of letting go of a piece of yourself, your identity, right? But it's not, because letting go, it doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting go of the control and the grip it has on you so that you can truly move forward. But when shadows come up, it's always a choice. It's always going to be your choice to move forward, to use it as a key to walk through that doorway, or to stay in the shadows, to stay unaware or to grow like never before. Let me just say, healing isn't easy and it's not always pretty, but it's definitely beautiful. I hope that this video shed some light on shadow work, and if you enjoyed it, I would love if you let me know in the comments. Hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and you hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video. And I'll see you next time. Bye!